Welcome, everybody. Welcome to this webinar on how to improve outreach, increase enrollment, and collect data using SMS texting with Community Connect Labs. My name is Neha Paralkar, and I am the organizer for this webinar. So just a few things before we get started. Please feel free to ask any questions. If you have a question during the webinar, just type it in the question box of your webinar panel, and we will answer as many as we can at the end of the session. And you should also know that we will be following up with an email with the deck to this webinar as well as the recording. So you'll have that in the next couple of days. And just to give you a brief introduction about ourselves, so Community Connect Labs is an initiative of GreatNonprofits. We enable nonprofits to generate fast, affordable, and reliable data from low-income communities through the innovative use of SMS technology. And today we're very excited to have Daniel Kadwani and Jacob Modell here to talk to us about how to use SMS texting to reach nonprofit clients. So I'm going to hand over to Daniel in just a second. Just a reminder, guys, if you have any questions, please leave them for us, and we will answer all of these at the end. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. This is Daniel Kadwani, the VP of Product here at GreatNonprofits and Community Connect Labs. And I want to thank you for joining us. We're excited to share what we've learned through working with our nonprofit partners and how they've used our texting tools to better conduct outreach to the folks that they serve. So the first piece of introduction here is what's the problem that we see our nonprofit partners facing? And the fact is that it's slow, expensive, and difficult. We're hearing for you folks to communicate with low-income people. The number of low-income people who need services is absolutely increasing, but the number of staff to serve them probably is not. And then from a tools perspective, these are difficult people to reach. Emails are not a great method for reaching them. You see a low response rate. Phone calls are probably the most effective, but they take a lot of effort in order to get a client on the phone in the first place, which takes a lot of staff time. So we understand that low-income communities are the folks who need services the most, and they're also the most difficult to reach. So how to solve that problem is what we think about. And where we've ended up in terms of a lot of our tools based on feedback from working with nonprofits is on text messaging, because this is where you see the most benefits. Here at GreatNonprofits, we've tested a lot of these other mediums. We've tried emails, we've tried building our own apps, we've tried using social network. And fundamentally, nothing is as simple, as powerful, or as ubiquitous as texting when it comes to engaging nonprofit clients. Fundamentally, texting is the way for you to meet your clients where they are and to do so in a way that scales with your staff time. You may know this anecdotally, as anyone who has a mobile phone currently sees text messages flying back and forth, but texting has incredible reach for low-income folks as well. Up to 90% of low-income people have mobile phones. 60% of those are smartphones, and that's compared to 30% of low-income people having landlines. And text messaging is ubiquitous here. It's built into the operating system of every phone, and on many phone plans, it's free to receive text messaging. People pay attention to their texts, as I'm sure you know. 95% of texts are read, and 95% of Americans text every day, and most of these texts are read almost immediately upon receipt, though there is a long tail where folks will go back and read text later. Texting also fits changing communication mores in our society, which are tending towards short, snappy, instant, and less formal communication. So both from a technology perspective and a social perspective, this is a wonderful, wonderful way to reach the people that you are trying to serve. It's accessible to these low-income folks. Even basic phones, you don't need a smartphone. You don't need a data plan, and you can receive text messaging. It's not free in all cases for clients to receive or send messages, but it is on the vast majority of plans. And most importantly, this is a simple way for low-income folks who are busy and has lots of demands on their time to receive information from you and respond back to you with information that you need from them in a way that's convenient and accessible and fits into their day. It's not an imposition on them. So what we've built and what we'll go through to demo and show you in more detail later in this webinar is a platform that allows you to create interactive text messaging based campaigns. So the left-hand side is an example flow, and the right-hand side is what someone receiving this flow might see. But our platform allows you to create campaigns around text messages and then send them out in an automated fashion at scale and in a highly personalized way that pulls in available data around the services you provide or the clients you serve in a way that gives them messages that are relevant and targeted. This is the most important portion of our platform, is this targeting capability and the flexibility that we have to build the campaign to serve the type of need that you have. And right now I'm going to kick it over to Jacob, who's going to describe how you can use our platform across the client lifecycle in different ways. Then we'll dive into specific examples at each of these points.
Yeah. Thank you, Daniel. And just to be clear, we have built a platform where you can use it for all of the different purposes that you see on the slide, and we'll talk through them. There are also other products that might fit your needs better, and so this conversation will be more about SMS texting in general and how we see this fitting into a nonprofit's sort of experience or life cycle with a client. So starting on the left-hand side of the slide, most organizations have some sort of screening criteria. So you might have certain populations that your interventions are just better at serving, or there might be restrictions from funders about or funding sources about what populations you can serve. And often it's really helpful and can better leverage your staff if some of this screening is automated. And text messages are a really great way for clients to, or potential clients to, privately see if they might qualify and fit with your program. And if they don't fit with your program, you can direct them to other resources or other programs out there that may better fit their needs. Similarly, when you enroll a client into your programs, you often need to collect information. Once again, it's a really easy way to collect this sort of information, and oftentimes the screening process and enrollment process can actually even be combined, where clients that pass the screening can then be directed directly into enrollment, and you can just collect your information there. Once a client's actually enrolled in your program, text messaging can be a really great way to do both performance measurement and then also enhance the actual interventions that you're delivering. So what do we mean by that? So if during a program you want to get interim feedback about how a client's doing, how they're feeling, how their interactions with staff are, that's a great way to do it where it's sort of private. So an example from our work is we're working with a provider that currently does this with a paper survey. One of the issues they're facing is the paper survey is handed back to a case manager, from a client is handed back to a case manager that they're actually evaluating, and that creates sort of conflicts of interest. But by replacing that with a text message survey, they're able to privately submit this sort of data, collect it in a digital format where they can act on it quicker and also get more confidential data from the clients. On the service side, a ton of different interventions have actually done reminders for appointments that clients might have with you. So those sorts of reminders to either come and show up to reduce no-show rates, or reminders to complete certain types of applications or application deadlines are incredibly important. And lastly, you could also deliver information to your clients via text messaging. And so that can actually enhance your existing interventions. Once they're outside of your organization, you may want to follow up with them via evaluation, tracking down those clients to get their experiences after the other program is very difficult often, and text messages is a great way to reach them, once again, because open rates tend to be pretty good, and also phone numbers, particularly for low income and other vulnerable populations, tend to be relatively stable in the short run. So it's a really great way to really collect information for folks that are outside of your program. Also, it may be an opportunity to restart the process for another organization and actually cross-enroll into programs as sort of a follow-up that maybe serve an older population or a population with different needs. So cross-enrollment is really a buzzword now in the space, and we really, and funders are super excited about it, and we really feel that this is a great way to direct people to resources of other organizations and ultimately increase the impact of your organization and provide clients with a better follow-up experience. So just some more concrete examples of what this actually looks like. So this is an example from SNAP, which is also known as food stamps, which is the largest anti-poverty program in the country. For those of you who may service this space or just know about it, it's very complicated as far as the actual application process and who qualifies. And one of our design principles with any of these sorts of tools is to let the nonprofits and the providers handle any complexity, but make the user experience for the clients really simple. So as you can see on the left, the actual logic and branching that happens for the flows is relatively sophisticated, but the experience for clients is much more linear, where they're just experiencing it as a stream of text messages that actually navigates them through these flows. And we'll show you that in a live demo in a minute. Reminders, a principle that we really like with reminders, a lot of folks just receive text messages saying that they have an appointment coming up or just giving them some sort of information. Our belief in our experience is that it's actually better to do these sorts of things via what we call an interactive reminder, where you're actually pushing out some additional information and you get some sort of confirmation that someone's actually opened and read it. So in this case, there's a text message being sent to a provider, and you're actually asking a question. And one of the nice things about questions is questions lead to responses. And this lets you better track whether people are actually acting on your reminder or actually digesting it. And the benefits of doing this is we hear from folks in particular who employ caseworkers or other staff that have to make phone calls. That's a really tiring part of your job, and it's not very rewarding for folks who really like interfacing with clients. So to the extent that you can automate these processes and replace manual calling, emailing, and texting, in addition to maybe gathering really valuable information, it's actually a way to leverage staff time so that caseworkers and folks like that can do what they're better at and what they're passionate about. So we feel that this is a really great way to better leverage your staff. So we talked a little bit about SNAP reminders. So once again, SNAP and food stamps it's a complicated process, and so it's not one of the things that you can use text messaging for is actually supporting folks throughout this entire process. So even though there is an initial intake and screening, there are subsequent interviews they have to do, there's subsequent documentation that they have to submit. And just to give you an idea of some of the opportunities there's an estimated $20 billion of unclaimed food stamps, and a ton of folks who really could qualify for it, and it would improve the quality of life and maybe even improve their outcomes in some of your programs as well. So what does this actually look like? So the first thing that we would recommend doing is you provide some sort of personalized opt-in. And the reason why a personalized opt-in is important is you really don't want to bug people via particularly text messaging, because if they don't want to participate, they can opt out, and that's typically done at the carrier level. So if they opt out of receiving text messages from your service for one service, it means they can't get it from any other service. So we always, as a best practice, recommend having a question where you ask people their permission to actually continue in the sort of survey or service. Personalizing that makes people more likely to actually answer those questions affirmatively and to participate. And we really believe that it's important to be transparent with clients and let them know the frequency of communication, so you know that they're not getting spammed. One way to do this really nicely is to build a kind of flyer, if you will, that has a keyword that they can text in, and in that flyer you provide information about what they're opting into, what the service is, what your organization will do and not do with as far as sharing phone numbers. You know, and the third point is you want to make sure that when you're informing them the type of messages that you're actually going to send to them. So if you're doing something around Snap reminders, that's the only types of messages they receive. And if you do want to send them messages for some other service, that you then give them an opt-in for that type of service. Lastly, it's important that clients have the ability for some sort of interactive messaging. Too often we see nonprofits that just kind of spam some phone list, and that's something that is really not a best practice. And people will, you know, start ignoring your messages. Having something that's actually more engaging, so using things like questions, providing actual additional services beyond information, so maybe it's a link to a website, or maybe it's a phone number to dial if they have an additional question. Those sorts of things are more effective ways of doing reminders. And once again, with Snap, you're sort of building on the concept of a single reminder for an event and making it into this sequence to sort of support them throughout the entire process and ultimately get them enrolled. So another sort of more simple example is just doing a client survey. So this could be a survey after receiving some services. It could be after an event you do. It could be even for volunteers. Once again, often we'll see this done via paper or pencil, or perhaps via a web survey that, particularly for low-income clients who are not used to taking those on a laptop or a tablet or what have you, it can be kind of awkward, and it's often inefficient. And we know that if you're trying to collect information, particularly without any sort of incentive, that any sort of small barrier will just prevent folks from actually providing this sort of feedback time. The other advantage of collecting it digitally is, once again, you reduce staff time in terms of data entry, which is not that much fun for anyone, or calling, or doing these more sort of time-intensive things. So even if you're spending a little money on the survey product and you know, the minimal cost it takes to actually transmit text messages, you'll once again be leveraging staff time so that they can do higher value services like help clients. We also feel that text messages are really great here for helping to bridge some of the digital divide issues. So oftentimes you'll be working with clients who do not have ready access to the internet, particularly, or email, or not check them. And so that's something where a client survey via SMS is just way more inclusive, and you'll capture a broader range of respondents. And the other sort of design principle we really advocate with client surveys is to make them adaptive. So you'll notice in this graphic here that there are different sorts of branches you can go down, And so if you answer yes or no to a certain question, it will actually ask a different follow-up question. This is incredibly important for SMS and text-based surveys, as you really want to keep these surveys very short and keep people engaged by asking relevant questions. You don't want to have them sort of skipping questions. And so here's an example of a client survey that we did, which was a little bit more on the qualitative side than the quantitative side. So we had clients actually keep a little bit of a food diary. And so what we would do is leverage the fact that you can send people messages at specific times to try to collect information on what they ate for breakfast, lunch, maybe as a snack in the afternoon, and for dinner. And this is really powerful because it's really hard to collect information about what folks ate, because people just don't remember. If you're asking retrospectively, what did you eat, in the past week for dinner, people may remember some things well, but other things not so well. So doing this in a very time-sensitive way is a way to collect just higher quality data, and is just a better experience for clients as well. In addition, with this survey, we leveraged aspects of mobile phones, which are hard to replicate in other channels. So in this case, the client actually took a picture of the inside of their refrigerator. So one of the nice things about living in a generation where people take selfies and send them and share them all the time is that we've discovered that most people with a cell phone are very, very comfortable taking relatively good pictures. And so we thought that this is a really powerful way to capture stories from your clients to share with funders, or just even understand their experiences better by leveraging novel data that you can collect via their phone. So that's an example of a client survey. We thought it would be helpful to actually do a live demo to actually show a little bit about what this experience looks like. And we'll be doing it with a simulated cell phone on a website, but it reflects the actual experience that a client would have. So this example comes from an enrollment tool that we built for earned income tax credit, which is the second largest anti-poverty program from the federal government and a number of state governments. And basically what this is, just for context, is if you file your taxes and you make below a certain amount of money in household income, then you're actually eligible for a refund even if you do not pay any taxes. So some people call it a negative income tax. And it's a really big deal. It could be worth up to $6,000 for some families, or even more if there's state or city versions of it. And amazingly, 20% of the people who would qualify for it don't actually file their taxes, and so they don't receive this type of benefit. So we built a really simple tool where by asking just a few questions, you could figure out whether someone was likely to qualify for it, and then direct them to resources where they could file their taxes for free. So over to the right is a picture of a mock cell phone, and how this would work is it's just a series mostly of yes or no questions. So first there's the opt-in that we discussed, so let's answer why to it. Great. So the first question is, are you married? So something else that's important is, you notice I answered why to the first question. I answered yes to the second question. It's important when you're selecting any sort of product for this or designing it that you're able to take multiple types of answers for the same thing. The other thing our tool, but other tools as well, allows you to do is to actually provide different language translations, which we also feel is incredibly important if you're dealing with populations where English is not their first language, and to actually potentially, as part of the opt-in, give them a choice of what language to actually use the tool in. So the next question is the number of children living in a household. So let's just say 2. And what you'll notice here is the subsequent question is whether my household income is greater than or less than a given threshold. What's important here and speaks to the adaptive part is this threshold that's actually served up to the client using their cell phone is based off of those previous answers. And just to show you, if we restart the survey, you notice that the threshold now, based off of those answer choices of having 0 children, is 21,000. So once again, the client experience is very linear, but the system on the back end figures out what the right question to ask them is. And this is appropriate for a couple of reasons. So one, answering a yes or no question is easier, but secondly, it's also less sensitive information. So oftentimes clients are reticent to give precise information about their incomes, but they're more willing to give less precise information, such as is it greater or less than a certain amount of money. So let's answer no to this. So it tells me that I'm likely eligible for this refund, and now it directs me to services to actually help me get it. So let's say I want to receive those services. It asks how I would like to receive those services, so free online prep and filing at a website or free in-person help. And now I have a link directly to that site, and it's a link that I can track to see how many folks are actually clicking on it and are going through this channel, in this case, to fill out taxes online for free. So that's just an example of a relatively simple product where you can answer just a few questions and direct people to services. So we'll go back to the presentation now. So there we go. So once again, so this is an example of the EITC screening tool you just saw, and why this is important, and some of the results from some pilots we've done with this is there's somewhere around $15 billion in unclaimed refunds affecting as many as 8.3 million low-income individuals. So when we piloted this tool last year, what we found is that people, once they were engaged and had found out about this refund, they were very, very willing to sign up for additional services. So in this case, the services were free tax prep programs at what are called Vita sites. In addition, you can give people options to then go into something like a reminder. So we offered people the opportunity to receive a text message 2 weeks in the future to remind them to fill out their taxes if they had qualified, and nearly 60% of folks were willing to sign up to receive a reminder about their taxes. And that surprised us because taxes are not everyone's favorite topic, and filling out your taxes is sort of a pain, but we view this as something that can be really powerful to actually build in these sort of reminders that people opt in and volunteer for, which are less annoying because they've opted in than just receiving a reminder out of the blue, let's say, about an appointment from an unknown sort of source. So that's it for the sort of content side. We wanted to leave plenty of time for questions, so I think we can start with those.
And maybe we'll give you all a couple of minutes to add your questions if you haven't already. So please do so, and then we'll walk through those as you share them with us.
Just a reminder, guys, if you have any questions, please leave them for us right now in the question box in the panel.
All right, it looks like we're seeing a couple of questions come in. So I'm going to start with the first question, and I'll read these through as we go. The first question is a database needed to support functions like reminder text, or is that information that we would put into your program? And the answer there is you don't need a database. You can absolutely upload any relevant information into our software directly. So this could be something like if you have a simple list of clients and the program that they're currently enrolled in. You could add that client as a contact in our system, and you'd associate the program with that particular contact, so you can reference it when you are reaching out to that client. You could do something alternatively where you're only sending messages to clients who are in certain programs.
Yeah, so our platform stores information in sort of like a CRM or a database that are associated with each client. So it might be information including when to send a reminder, it might be something about what program they're enrolled in, it might be demographic information. And so not only can you actually schedule reminders that way, but if you wanted to send different reminders to clients with either different demographics or enrolled in different programs, you can customize the messaging that way. And that is definitely also best practice, not only for our platform, but for other platforms as well. So there was a question about cost. So I think that there's two types of cost when looking at these systems. So there's typically some cost for the platform itself. So you can think about this like a subscription fee, and then there's some cost for actually transmitting the messages. And different companies price it in different ways. How we've tried to price it is there are sort of different tiers that include a certain amount of messages with very small overage fees. And the reason behind that is SMS as a technology has some transmission costs, which are roughly on the order of a cent, somewhere between half a cent and a cent per message transmitted. So for a tool, to give you an idea, like a tool like the Earned Income Tax Credit tool that we disseminated, that we showed you as part of the demo, that probably costs somewhere around 10 cents for a client to complete. And so it's pretty low cost, comparable to something like sending a letter, or but certainly more expensive than something like an email for sure. Yeah, so our software, like many products out there, are oh yeah. So the question, excuse me, the question is, can we describe what's needed to run our software? So our software is cloud-based, like most of the platforms out there. So there's not software per se that you have to install or a server you have to set up. It's cloud-based, just like a web survey platform, and it looks, as you probably could see from the screenshots, very much like a web survey platform, just that it's customized for actually designing these sorts of tools specifically for SMS. There are other web survey providers that do provide SMS functionality. Some of the higher-end web survey providers do this, but typically those platforms are designed for creating things that look like web surveys but are actually text surveys, and we've found that that typically makes for a worse user experience because it's harder to include some of the branching logic, some of the ability to accept multiple different types of responses, and other things that we've found are really essential when working through SMS. In part because unlike a written survey or paper survey, there's no button to push or a box to check. People are just writing in answers.
So it looks like that's it from all your questions. We'll give you just 1 or 2 more minutes in case there's anything else you want to learn from us, and then we'll end the webinar. And then just as a reminder, you can see if you're interested in contacting us to learn more, you can go to our website, which is communityconnectlabs.com, and then /contact to get in touch if you have any more questions. Particularly around pricing, we can give you more specifics if we know the types of clients you're trying to serve, the programs you're going to run, and the number of messages you might be sending. And we'll also be sending out a follow-up email with a link to this deck and a recording of the webinar, so you'll have all this information at your fingertips if you need it later. It looks like that's it for questions, so thanks very much for joining us. We appreciate your time, and have a great day.